Thursday nights on BBC One for the topical debate of this week in an hour after Question Time sets the agenda.
Tonight we're in Blackpool and welcome to Question Time. And with us on the panel tonight, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Home Secretary and everything else you can think of, an MP for 47 years, no fan of Brexit, Ken Clarke. Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, who stood against Jeremy Corbyn for the leadership of the Labour Party, Owen Smith. The former leader of UKIP, who led the campaign for a referendum on the EU, Nigel Farage. The businesswoman, politician, former winner of The Apprentice, Michelle Dewberry. And the television presenter, Radzi Chinyanganya, Blue Peter presenter, just back from Seoul, where he was covering the Winter Olympics. Good, thank you very much. Well, we have a lot to get through, but just a reminder from home, if you want to join in the arguments, you can use our hashtag BBCQT on both Twitter and Facebook and argue the toss. Our first question tonight is from Rachel Lord, please. Rachel?
With less than 400 days until Britain leaves the EU, has the government wasted the last 616 days?
Right, 616 days wasted, 400 days to go. Have they been wasted? Nigel Farage?
Well, in some ways they have, because it's all a bit contradictory, isn't it? Because Theresa May gives the Lancaster House speech in January last year, and I'm thinking, I don't believe this. Here's a British Prime Minister using exactly the same words and phrases that I've been using for 20 years without being called extremist or mad or bad. And I thought, wow, we've really got a government here that's going to deliver on the things that people voted for. And then a few months later, her second big speech on Brexit was in Florence, where she says, well, we are leaving the European Union, but it's a really fantastic organisation, and we're going to sign back up to justice and home affairs and cooperation in this and that and the other. And you think, well, are we really leaving or aren't we? And when she was asked a question on a radio show recently, if there was a referendum now, how would she vote? She couldn't answer the question. And I just feel, I know she's on a tight corner. I know it's difficult. She's got people like old Clarke over here, and Anna Soubry, and it's difficult for her. But I do think these mixed messages need to end. She's giving this big speech tomorrow. I think she needs to come out with some clarity, and she needs to put a counter to what Monsieur Barnier put on the table yesterday. We need to say, right, this is what we're after. We're reasonable people. We're prepared to compromise. But unless you're prepared to stop treating us like a hostage, to treat us with some respect, then we will say that no deal is better than a bad deal and walk away. And unless she does that tomorrow, the EU will not, in my opinion, take her seriously and will go on wasting time.
Just, where would you compromise? I thought Brexit meant Brexit to you,
well,
of all
Brexit
people.
does mean Brexit, but of course there are compromises. I mean, we need to talk about the financial settlement, and if there's a couple of bob we need to pay them, we'll do it. I mean, things like that will be reasonable. On Northern Ireland, to sort out the border issue, there needs to be compromise actually on both sides. So, of course, we're reasonable, but what is for certain is every single major player in that referendum campaign, Ken included, said, if we vote to leave, we are leaving the single market, and by implication, the customs union. And of course, David Cameron said it, all your team on the Remain side said it, all the Leave team said it, and that's the point. Unless we leave the customs union and the single market, we will not be able to go global and to get the benefits that ought to come from Brexit.
OK. Ken Clarke, then. Back to the question, have the government wasted the last 616 days with only 400 to go?
Well, there have been mistakes, because it was a mistake to invoke Article 50 before you were ready to start. And that was because some of the Eurosceptics were getting rather paranoid, as they still are. They're going to be cheated somehow. It's still not going to happen. So this was meant to be a flagship statement, and we weren't ready to negotiate anything.
Is that why you voted against it?
I voted against it because I stuck to my lifelong convictions as a believer in the European project. I think...
regardless of what the British public voted in the referendum?
I made it quite clear that I thought it was not a suitable thing for a referendum. I thought it was absurd to have one day such a broad question with hundreds of complicated questions below, and that's the problem now, because nobody actually debated what's going to be years of quite complicated negotiations. Nobody addressed what leave would be. Nobody thought leave was going to win. Nigel didn't. I heard him cheerily on the night of the count. He was more or less saying the struggle continues and went to bed, and then was amazed, as Boris was shocked to discover that they'd actually won. And nobody had actually even begun to think through that what we're doing, if we follow this decision, is actually taking apart over 40 years in which we've actually prospered, done well, been quite a prominent country in a rules-based international order, a globalised economy, a major free trade system. Our role in the world is one of the major players in the EU. That's why we're so important to the United States and so on. And our modern economy has been based on this. And now all this we have to go through item by item. The problem with the debate is, like all trade treaties and political treaties, it is so complicated you don't normally have a public debate about it at all. I mean, the technocrats who negotiated and a few anoraks in the House of Commons and the people in the CBI and in the trade unions are usually the only people who get into this kind of picture. So time goes by and people want an instant, simple solution and it's not going to happen.
Optimistic, are you? In 400 days the thing will be sorted?
I think there's the slightest chance of our having arrived at the final destination in 400 days. I think we need a transition period of at least 2 years and as long as it takes to actually have grown up, sorted out details of what the new relationships are going to be that don't disrupt some people's business or don't disrupt some of our industries or services and so on. Behind all the passion about Brexit, there are an awful lot of things important to our society, important to our jobs, our investment, but also our security and environment and other things have to be sorted out. So 600 days, it's a pity we haven't made further progress, but there we are.
Michelle Dewberry.
Well, so firstly, I agree with you in the sense of there was no plans made, I don't think, to consider the outcome of Brexit. And I think that was absolutely disgraceful. And you say that, Ken, though, as though it's someone else's responsibility to have done that thinking. I feel very strongly that the government let us down by not even having a plan for Brexit when it happened. I do. And I feel like that was the government at the time's responsibility. Now, as for the last 616-something days, I would like to rewind that and play it as a film and play either the Benny Hill theme tune or the Hokey Cokey over it, because I have found it so confusing. We're in, we're out, we want this, we don't want this, there's impact statements, oh no, there's not. You know, it's now become something where there's so much political posturing, almost like people are trying to get political personal gain, instead of coming together, respecting the referendum result and looking at how do we implement this for the greater good of the country in the future, not for the greater good of a person's political career going forward.
Let me come to some members of the audience and see what they think. What do you think about the way it's going? You, sir, yes.
I would say, just to concur with what Nigel was saying before, I think the United Kingdom currently, there's never a time like the present where we need a strong leader, whoever that is. And unless somebody at the top can show some teeth, because I've not seen it myself yet, it's as you say, we're just getting mixed messages all the time and no clarity whatsoever.
Who would you like to see leading this?
I don't really care who leads. I just want to see a strong person.
All right, and the person up there at the very back, yes.
This is the whole problem. If it had remained the common market, which was what it set out to be before I was too young to vote in or out, it was a common market. Yeah. People wouldn't have an issue with that if we had a common market where we all traded together and a security arrangements. But it's got far too complicated, as it's showing by how complicated it is to unravel. It's going to take ages and ages to unravel and unpick it and decide what we do want and what we don't want.
Are you dismayed by that?
Yes.
Yeah. Owen Smith.
I don't think they wasted it so much as they've been scrapping amongst themselves, because this is incredibly complicated. And, you know, Michelle is right, the government hadn't prepared properly. Nigel definitely didn't think he was going to win. He was clearly delighted that he did win.
But I tried damned hard.
Yeah,
didn't
well, you know, I think you've been extremely influential.
I've been
Nigel.
very trying.
You've
yeah,
been very
absolutely.
influential, unfortunately. But the truth is, it's incredibly complicated. The lady there said that, you know, she wished we were still in the common market. Well, common market, the modern equivalent of that, is effectively staying in the customs union and the single market. But the Tories don't want to stay in the customs union. They don't want to stay in the single market, they say. They thought we'd sorted out what we were going to do on transition. Ken talks about a 2-year period being needed for that. Now we're not even sure what they're going to do for transition. Northern Ireland, that I'm responsible for and has obviously caught all the headlines this week, nobody given any thought of that. Nigel didn't talk about it. Nobody really knew how we were going to maintain the Good Friday Agreement and an open border in Ireland. And so we are, after the referendum, trying to sort out these incredibly thorny issues, and it is going to take a long time. And it isn't helped, frankly, by people like Nigel saying, get on with it, we've got to deliver it tomorrow. And he's doing that, of course, for his political purposes.
No,
he's doing that because he believes it gets him back in the spotlight. The truth is, we've got to get it right.
We voted to
We've got to
leave.
get it right. But we didn't vote on all of those separate, complex issues.
That every major
single
player,
market, customs
do you accept
union?
that every major player on the Remain and Leave side said, if we vote to leave, we are leaving the single market?
No.
You don't accept that.
I saw Daniel Hannan. I saw Daniel Hannan, the Conservative MEP, saying explicitly nobody's talking about leaving the single market. I saw Owen Paterson, who was the Northern Ireland Secretary, saying explicitly nobody's talking about leaving the single market. They are two of the leading Brexit
I said
campaigners.
major players.
OK, Radzi, what's your
I have
view?
to say...
You mean you, Nigel?
I've been
This
Boris,
me.
I've been Michael Gove, I've been the really senior
Should we
figures.
allow a new member of the panel to have a word? Radzi.
I'm getting really bored of hearing politicians tell us what they believe we really voted for when it came to the EU referendum. I spent 1 month in Pyeongchang working at the Winter Olympics. I came back and it feels like nothing's changed whatsoever. To come to your point, Rachel, I think it's a really good one. The waters have been muddied so much with the customs union, duplicitous semantics where we're sort of having one finger in one pie, one finger in another. And for me, the whole point of the referendum was, do we want independence or do we want unity? I think the public have actually voted on this. I think we know where we stand. And I think to take us anywhere elsewhere is to do us as an electorate a disservice. And actually, I think it's undemocratic to question the will of the people, regardless of which way you voted. We know the direction of travel now, and let's actually move in that direction.
Following on really from what Ken Clark said, that it hadn't been thought through properly. It wasn't thought through before we went in properly. Nobody told us that our fishing industries were going to be decimated, and many other things. And following on from that, from what that lady there said, yes, it has got very complicated. We voted, well, I didn't vote, actually. I think it's the worst thing that this country has ever been dragged into. And
you didn't vote because you were against the idea of vote?
I was totally opposed to the idea right from the beginning. We've always been an independent country, and anybody under the age of 40 has never lived in a free country.
OK.
Think about that.
And over there. Yes.
My question is really that, you know, this is one of the biggest decisions we're going to make in our country since the World War II. And I think we went into a referendum with hardly any information whatsoever. We had figures quoted on the back of a red bus, which we were sucked into believing. And as the impact and the implications of going into the referendum and the agreement we're going to come out with suggests we might be in a different place, I genuinely feel that the people who voted to leave didn't have the relevant facts, and now as the facts come on the table, we need a genuine requirement to go back and vote again.
Karen Hines, we'll take up your point. Karen Hines. That was you.
It was, yes. It was
Do you
me.
want to put... Well, now you've had your say. Now put your question. What was your question going to be?
So my question is John Major right to suggest that once we understand the impact of leaving the EU, should we actually go back to the people to actually vote for what is on the table?
So a second vote. A second referendum?
Yeah, that's what John Major was suggesting, either through Parliament or through the public vote, that once we understand what we're actually agreeing to leave with, rather than the fiction that we were propagated with earlier, once we get those facts on the table, should we actually revisit and say, is this the deal we thought we were voting for
Michelle
in the first
Dewberry,
time?
do you think that's a good idea?
I just don't really see... I voted leave, and I share concerns that actually there was misinformation on both sides. There was... It was just, for me, it was so focused on fighting with each other instead of articulating things properly to us. So I share that concern, but I don't see how a second referendum could work, because if the EU knew that actually we're just going to have a second referendum and therefore we could potentially undo the first one, why would they work hard to give us a deal of any substance?
But they're not.
I don't see they would.
But they're not, are they? They're not. They're absolutely not doing that at all.
OK, you sit up there, with spectacles on the gangway there. Yes.
All we need is a strong leader what's going to give us a vision of what direction we're going to go. There's no strong leadership to give us any sort of focus, and all the country should get behind us from that point.
So in the absence of what you call a strong leader, what happens? What do you think is going to happen?
It's going to be side to side all the time. You've got polarisation between both parties. You know, you need a strong leader, and then the opposition needs to go along with them.
Nigel Farage, you once flirted with the idea of a second referendum.
No, I didn't. I said I feared. I feared,
all right,
because there is a great Brexit betrayal going on, that Parliament may force a second referendum upon us. I pray they don't, but I do fear, and I think some of the people on this panel would like a second referendum.
I think he did say he wanted a second.
No, it was his policy. You know he'd like one because he said he wanted one.
Of course not. But the point is...
He said you wanted one.
No, the point is, I don't want a second referendum, but I fear it. And John Major, you know, for John Major to say, and they're all doing it, any of you here that voted Brexit, you're thick, you're stupid, you didn't understand what you're doing. And we're sick to death of insults from people like John Major. We knew exactly what we were voting on. We voted to become an independent country. Full stop.
All right,
that's what we voted on.
Mr. Trump, can I challenge that slightly and say, when we voted to leave, did we know we were leaving the customs union, and did we notice that we were actually going to vote for a northern-southern Ireland border? That was never brought up at all.
Can you take... Yeah, let me just go around the panel again. Ken Clark, what is your view? Great, I'll come back to you, but what is your view about how this thing should be endorsed, if it should be, either by a referendum or by Parliament?
Sticking to the serious subject, because Nigel sort of starts insulting John Major, then claiming all things being done at a level of serious. Let's try and take this. It is very serious to future generations, what we're talking about, actually, and should not be reduced to that kind of rubbish, frankly. Now, I do agree that the referendum campaign was, it certainly as reported in the national media, was disastrous. I mean, a load of rubbish from both sides was reported. Absolutely none of the issues being talked about now. I did some town hall meetings with leading figures on the other side, and there were perfectly sensible exchanges on both sides. Some of them, none of that actually was shared with the public. Anybody who didn't know much about the European Union was probably more mystified by the end of the campaign than they had been at the start. So there's a danger we'd repeat that. I mean, I'm an eccentric Remainer, if you like. I don't want a second referendum, particularly, as I've just said, it is on a hugely complex series of treaties which you're not going to have a serious debate about. The problem with the broad brush question before was, on both sides, Remain and Leave, everybody didn't vote for the same reason. People with voted Remain, some of them with different reasons.
But we know all that, but should Parliament have a final say?
When I say I heard no sane reason for leaving Euratom, I'm told that my masters, the people, have ordered me to leave Euratom. With the greatest respect, I don't think I'm being too arrogant in saying I don't think most of my constituents had any view on Euratom. You'd have to do them the courtesy of explaining what nuclear safeguarding work it does.
Do you have a view? Do you have a view about? Do you have a view about whether there should be a parliamentary vote at the end of the day?
I think there should be a free vote is very good, because if you had a free vote, both parties have collapsed. They're both hopelessly divided. The reason you have such a bizarre rather mixed messages as the official party programmes coming out is Theresa can't get her cabinet to agree with each other. She's negotiating...
Can't get you to agree with her.
Well, I'm not in the cabinet. She's negotiating with Boris more than she's able to negotiate with Michel Barnier or anybody else. And on the Labour side, the vast majority of them are pro-European, but Corbyn and McDonnell are two of the most hard-line Eurosceptics in the House of Commons. Now, members of Parliament, two-thirds of them will be in favour of staying in the common market, which is now called the single market and the customs union.
So is that how they're going to vote, and that's what's going to happen, is it?
Well, a free vote would help, because they're terrified of the whips, and they're terrified of the Daily Mail, because they're denounced as traitors, they're enemies of the people, if they don't really realise that every one of those millions who voted Remain knew it meant leaving the customs union, which they most certainly didn't.
Radzi,
all had views on the Irish border, apparently. I don't remember it being mentioned.
Do you want to see Parliament vote on this in the way that Ken has just explained, that probably it will turn down a lot of the ideas that Nigel Farage has and others had when they voted to leave?
For me, no, and it's very simple. In 1975, when we had the original EU referendum, the answer was we wanted to remain in at that point. There was no question about by how much do we want to remain in, and let's negotiate that and let's nuance it. There was no question then, but now the answer has been Brexit. We're now going to change it to the answer that we feel the will of the power wants. But in addition to that, I think there's a broader question about what is politics and what is democracy. Why is it that we're only allowed one vote every 5 years, or we do have by-elections as well? On X Factor, on Strictly Come Dancing, you can vote weekly, immediately with your phones.
All right. Heaven help us.
I say make it more interactive.
God forbid an election.
Weekly referendum.
He's got a point, I think.
Yes. Well, for some of us will be in business. Anyway, you, sir.
I was a Vote Leave coordinator, and people voted for various different reasons, a number of different reasons. It wasn't one particular one. But two members of the audience, I think, have hit it spot on tonight. It's about leadership. And Owen's very eloquent and spoke very well tonight with regard to the Labour position, but it's very important that Corbyn has a role to play. And I'm a Conservative, and the government is leading, but it needs to be every political party has to show true leadership, and the flip-flopping by Labour over the last 12 months, I just think, has been disgraceful.
So what do you make of this change, apparent change in Labour's policy?
There'll be another change next week. That's what we've been, put up with for the last 12 months. There's no direction, political direction, and every party has to play a role.
They said they're in favour of the customs union. They want to stay in that.
They are this week. But we don't know whether that's going to be the same case going forward. That's the difficulty. You've got each political party has to set out what they believe, and there will be an influence on the outcome of the overall negotiations. But at the moment, you've not got the effective opposition that actually makes the government stronger as well. I think Theresa's doing the best she can, but each political party has to play a role.
OK, you're in the front row there.
Just to draw back to the original point that was made, I'm just going to go back to, first of all, the lady over here on my left. Quite frankly, as somebody that also voted to leave European Union, well-educated in politics, I find it absolutely unruly how she can even come out with that, physically form it in her mind. But moving on from that, in terms of John Major, obviously I've seen the speech that he's done recently, and we're saying to treat him, what he's saying as serious, but how can we treat what he's saying as serious when he's backtracked? Because was it not him that first of all put us in the Maastricht Treaty all those years ago and led the way? And now he's backtracked and he's trying to say that Theresa May's wrong for what she's doing. How do we know that Theresa May's not going to change her mind? And all this time that it's taken us to actually get out of Brexit, get out of the European Union, which is something we've voted for, whether it's 1% over what we need or what, it doesn't matter what the percentage is. We voted, and that's that. So in the time that it's taking for us to get out of the European Union, how many people are going to change their mind between now and then, just like John Major did?
OK. What do you think of John Major effectively endorsing the policy for which you ran as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party? A second referendum before everything's signed off?
Well, I think John Major's views should be taken absolutely seriously. He was Prime Minister of this country. He was the man who started the peace process that delivered eventually the Good Friday Agreement. He is someone whose views, I think, are seriously put, and I don't think Nigel should be insulting to him in the way which he was a minute ago.
Hang on, John Major insulted 17.4 million people. I just insulted him.
No, he didn't.
All right, the person in the back there, yes. Yeah. Hold on a second. Yes, the person there, the back row.
With the parties collapsing and the divisions that are in British politics at the moment, is at the time not right for a new party to be formed and for this party to actually do what the British people have voted for?
What kind of party? Would that be a kind of UKIP kind of party by any chance?
Well, no, not necessarily.
What? Not necessarily.
But maybe people from all parties could come together to sort out this issue rather than the parties fighting within each other and against each other.
Let's just take a slightly different point. Peter Lemarinel, can we have your question? Peter.
67% of Blackpool voted Leave. Has Jeremy Corbyn's U-turn betrayed millions of its Northern Labour Leave voters?
This is with his, what you call his U-turn is saying Labour would stay in the customs union after. Yeah. We're in a strong Brexit area, Owen Smith. What do you make of Jeremy Corbyn and that question?
Well, I don't think it is a U-turn. We said previously that we thought the customs union... we said previously we thought the customs union should be an option that the Tories should be keeping on the table. And the major reason we thought that was about the prosperity of this country and the need for us to trade with our biggest trading partners, the European Union, with whom we do almost half of our trade, and because taxes and tariffs would damage the incomes of people in the northwest and elsewhere across Britain. But also because it's the one way in which we can try and guarantee that we keep the border open in Northern Ireland, between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, that is so important to the underpinning of the Good Friday Agreement. And all Jeremy has said this week is that we've now decided that we will negotiate membership of a customs union in order to achieve those two important things, and that the Tories, who've ruled out staying in the customs union, are therefore creating the problem that they cannot solve at present of the border in Northern Ireland, and unfortunately on their own sums are condemning this part of the world, if we had the no deal that Nigel talked about, to see a reduction in GDP, see a reduction in earnings here of 12%. Now, nobody at the election was told that.
Double it, make it 25, make it 50.
It's not my number, Nigel, it's the Tory government's number.
It's the civil service, what do you expect?
Well, it's our independent civil service working for a Tory government.
Owen Smith,
well, I don't think you should be publishing them
some people think that this is a ploy by Labour to get a vote in the House of Commons that will unseat Theresa May, if you get a vote on it, like Ken Clarke might vote for it.
But he won't unseat Theresa May. But I think we could win a vote in the House of Commons and Customs Union. And the Labour, the Blairites, have been very successful in getting Jeremy through gritted teeth to say he'll let them allow it to be the Labour Party's policy for the time being.
So sorry, so you would vote for it, and
I have voted for it several times already.
So how would that not, if she lost the majority in the House of Commons, how would that not unseat her?
Because governments don't fall if they lose an amendment to a bill in the House of Commons. They fall if there's a vote of confidence for the purpose. And actually, it's more complicated nowadays because we've passed an Act of Parliament designed to make Parliaments last 5 years. It's everybody making it more exciting in the newspapers that it claims that if the government loses one vote, it falls. We've beaten them once already. They were trying to stop Parliament having a vote at all on the final deal. We had a majority of that. There were 11 traitors, rebels, enemies of the people, all that kind of thing. And now we're going to have a vote. There wasn't a murmur the next day that the Prime Minister should resign. It didn't threaten the government. I had not put Corbyn down in the street.
Supposing she said it was a vote of confidence.
Well, she'd be very unwise to do so, and the Chief Whip has already said they won't do that. It would be just completely crazy to complicate it. It would be completely crazy. I mean, this exasperation is being felt all over the country, I think, with this process, and I'm afraid I warn you, we haven't started the serious negotiations yet. You're going to have years of this. How we will maintain a public debate about it, I've no idea. In the modern world, 60% of our trade, if you count all the EU deals that we're members of, 60% of our trade is in trade agreements. In the modern world, countries like ours trade with other countries with trade treaties. I'll do just that one point, trade treaties. And that involves agreeing some mutually binding rules, regulations, the base standards, the basis which you're going to trade, an arrangement for settling disputes, and all the things that people seem to think we're getting rid of. If you leave all our present trading arrangements, you've got to go sort of others, and all this stuff that Boris produced in a speech after the referendum about global Britain, and how the Americans and the Chinese and the Indians and the Brazilians are waiting to throw open their doors. Come in, Britain, no rules, you make your mind up how, what you want to sell, no conditions. This is all a fantasy world. We are going to leave.
They're queuing up, Ken.
The political they're not
countries
queuing
all
up.
over the world.
Unlike you,
queuing
I've
up
been
to
involved
talk to
in
us.
trade negotiations.
I've been in
Nigel.
business
Do you
too,
think
don't
you're going to
worry.
get a quick trade deal with China
queuing up to
or with the
work.
United States? You're living completely in cloud cuckoo.
Your
Negative.
foreign secretary is living.
It has to be done
Your foreign
seriously
secretary is living
because
in cloud cuckoo land.
It certainly keeps coming out with a lot of rather comic remarks, I must say. I mean, Boris is very good at. But I think both Boris and Nigel are not frightfully good on the way in which the modern globalised economy works, and thousands of jobs in this country, and our future prosperity depend on being successful
I have
in a
to stop you because I
globalised
want to hear from the
economy.
gentleman up there. Yes, you.
Well, I'd just like to say to Ken, you know it is a comic remark, telling people who voted Leave that they didn't know what they were voting for. Yeah. And just in response to the lady down there, I'd like to ask her, what did you vote for? Did you vote for an EU army? Did you vote for Turkey to join the EU? Did you vote for, an EU super-state, an ever-expanding EU state? What did you vote for, or what kind of Remain did you want?
Who are you talking to? The lady down here?
Yeah, I was talking to the lady who...
Oh, yes. All right, a brief answer. I was going to ask you on the panel, but you can do it from there.
Thank you very much.
But keep it brief if you would, because we want to move on.
Of course, yes. No, I voted to Remain. I didn't vote for Turkey. I didn't vote for all those other things because I wasn't given that option. I voted Remain because I thought that that's the best option for this country in terms of its trade deal, in terms of other things. And I think one of the major reasons people voted Leave was because of migration issue and the people movement issue. But we're not part of the Schengen arrangement, so actually we have the right to empower ourselves not to have the level of immigration that was causing quite as much concern as it was. So we had that power within our own hands anyway.
All right. And the woman in the fourth row there, 1, 2, 3, fourth row there, yes, you. Be brief if you would, because I think we must move on to another point.
I just don't understand why we're discussing another vote. It's not uncommon that politicians, don't tell 100% of the truth all the time. At a time where there's so much anxiety...
Really?
Never.
At a time where there's so much anxiety going around and so much fear within what's going to come of the future, do not put fear into democracy. We voted for independence. We might not have known the total ins and outs of what it was, but we voted for independence. Don't then put fear into democracy. The people voted for what they wanted, and don't remove that power from the people.
So hang on a second. So you trust Parliament to get it right, to interpret what you saw as the vote on Brexit, to get it right?
I hope Parliament will get it right. I wasn't of age to vote, but I would have voted Remain. However, the public body as a whole voted to Leave. I hope Parliament will get it right, but I don't think sacrificing democracy and taking away that power that the people were given and what we fought so hard for to change our minds is the right thing to do.
Michelle, what do you make of Mr Le Marinel's point about Corbyn's U-turn, as he put it, betraying Northern Labour? A place like Blackpool that voted 67% Brexit.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it is a betrayal. I think that people voted to leave the European Union, and when we're talking about staying in a customs union, which doesn't even exist at the moment, you cannot... We want to create our own trade deals. We cannot do that in that customs union. So to the first point, absolutely, it's a betrayal of what we voted for. And to the second point, is it time for a new party? Absolutely. I am 100% politically homeless at the moment. I was in the last election, which is why I ran myself as an independent. And I feel even more so like that. And I know that there is an awful lot of people like me that do not have anyone to vote for at all.
Yeah. Raja, are you behind Corbyn on this Labour policy?
Well, it's just a point on Corbyn generally, which for me is that he's damned if he does and he's damned if he doesn't. And I feel that for me, Jeremy Corbyn over the last 2 years has had to endure and shoulder a sluice of propaganda, whether it's about his suit, whether it's about the national anthem, whether it's about his friends in Hezbollah and Hamas and all... OK, well, that might be your opinion, but for me, the way he's dealt with it, with honour, with dignity and nobility, that's what real leadership is.
we'll move on.
Can I make a quick point on
Very
that?
quick.
Because I know a lot about forming new political parties and how difficult it can be.
3 or 4 times.
But you know, Owen, UKIP was a phenomenon. UKIP drew votes from the Conservatives.
You said a quick point.
But it drew more from Labour.
Is what we're looking for.
The real answer is yes, Corbyn has betrayed 4 million Brexit voters. But the really interesting question, the lady at the back, if Brexit gets betrayed, there will be a new coming together and a new party in British politics. Of that, I've got no doubt whatsoever.
OK.
It's a taster.
No doubt. No doubt.
The Farage party.
We'll move on. Just to say, Question Time is going to be in London and Westminster next week, and after that we're going to be in Dover, in the port of Dover. And if you want to come, on the screen are the details of how to apply. I'll give them, as always, at the end. But let's change subjects now and come to something from Carol Henshaw, please. Let's have your question. Carol Henshaw.
Is it fair that on 2 occasions planning permission to frack this area was not approved by the council and the government overruled us?
Well, you can see it's a popular question, and it's a very pertinent one here. I mean, on the way into Blackpool, there are great signs on the roads protesting against fracking, and it's a sort of case test, really, of whether the whole industry of fracking should get the go-ahead. Doesn't get the go-ahead elsewhere. Should it get the go-ahead here? And is it fair? Michelle Dewberry, what do you make of local people saying we don't want it and being overruled?
I think fracking, for whatever reason, it is an industry that has completely failed to win over people and to convince people of their arguments. I think people are concerned about safety. People don't want, whether it's earthquakes and big firms denying all knowledge and then admitting down the line maybe it is. I think there's a real safety concern, and until those safety concerns are properly addressed and people understand what's going on, until that point is reached, we've got a problem. And I don't understand what it's going to take, because it hasn't yet happened that industry has managed to get people bought into what they're doing and the benefits of it and address their real safety concerns.
So do you think its time will come when it's being handled more dexterously, or do you think there are real dangers and risks in it, like local people here have
I think
opined?
It's something that is still not understood enough to the degree where we can make a proper informed decision about it. And I don't quite understand why. It's a very unpopular industry, and I understand people's concerns here. If it was on my back garden, I'd have concerns about it as well. But I just think that the industry needs to work closely with government regulations and residents to properly communicate what it's doing and to reassure those safety concerns if it wants to get the go-ahead.
Nigel Farage, do you think it's right of government to overrule local opinion on this?
It's right of government to have concerns. And Michelle's point about a very effective lobby against fracking, and they've been very good at it. They've been very good at putting the fear of God into people. Look, no form of extractive industry doesn't bring some degree of risk with it, whether it's coal mining, whatever it may be. We've been fracking since the 1950s. America's done more of it than we've done. Even we've done a bit of fracking, in this country. What you have in this part of England is the most phenomenal reserve of natural gas, exploited carefully and sensibly. It would not leave great scars on the landscape like coal mining did in many areas, and it would revolutionise the economy of the northwest of England by providing tens of thousands of well-paid jobs. We must be mad to look a gift horse in the mouth. Mad.
Nigel, for me...
So why is it so unpopular?
It's unpopular because people don't like things in their backyard, obviously, and because the campaign's been effective against it. But it works.
There's an interesting parallel between the will of the people vote. The will of the people was kicked out in one and not in the other. Mr Farage threw away £39 billion as a one-off throwaway line. How many council houses can you buy for £39 billion?
If people here don't want it, that's fine. And they have a referendum on it, they can decide. That's fine.
No,
all I'm saying is...
why not?
Well, that shows you how we can modernise our democracy at local level too, doesn't it?
Ken Clark.
Well, there's astonishing events taken place.
You're going to agree.
I entirely agree with Nigel Farage.
Don't make it a habit, Ken.
Nigel, the first time I think ever, we were in total agreement, and you got loudly booed by the audience for giving the answer, and so my boos are a little more restrained. I joined.
So why are you in favour?
Well, because we have had decades of fracking, and all this campaigning about all the dreadful things that are supposed to happen. Your water will be poisoned, you'll have earthquakes and all the rest of it.
They did have earthquakes.
The tremor in Blackpool was not detectable by a human being on the surface. It was a very low-level tremor. It's described,
okay.
it's described as an
this.
earthquake by the campaigners, but it wasn't.
Did any of you... All right, let's just ask. Did any of you feel the tremors when... Put your hands up if you did.
Well, the National Geological Survey was very surprised by your sensitivity.
These are very sensitive
by
people.
your sensitivity.
The person with the coloured sleeve up there at the back. Yes, you. Yes.
There's a lot of people peddling mistruths and misinformation, and Nigel is a perfect example of how he obviously hasn't read up, he doesn't know the facts, and I'm absolutely amazed that Kenneth Clark doesn't either. I would have really liked to have thought that you could have stopped and read your facts about fracking coming to this area.
So why are you against fracking?
Well, my main reason is a bit different from the other locals because I disagree with fracking because it's burning a fossil fuel. And I'm so against that. With the environment issues that are pertinent at the moment, what are we thinking of? Digging up more fossil fuels. But as well as that, it's the local people. And the question which was asked and which you haven't really answered is, what about the government overturning the will of the local people?
There are many things where of course we have a good local planning system, but in big things of national importance, the government must have a role, particularly nowadays. If Isambard Kingdom Brunel decided he wanted to build a railway line from London to Bristol today, his advisors would tell him he'd be mad going through the planning system because there'd be vast opposition all the way down the line, everybody would be opposed to it. The government had to let him do that.
It's called HS2.
Yeah. It's called HS2 because they get fought by local people, but somebody somewhere has got to provide the route for major infrastructure projects. We do need runways at airports. We do need to use our own oil and gas reserves.
What account do you take of
so
local
on.
opinion? Anything or none?
You take account of local opinion.
And then ignore it.
But you don't ignore it, but if in fact the national interest outweighs that, and if the local opinion is just rejecting the advice of, I already mentioned the National Geological Survey, the scientific world about whether there are risks involved in fracking or not, I think a government's entitled to say in the national interest we're going ahead.
I could not be more opposed to Ken and Nigel, and thank you very much at the back for raising that point about the lack of fossil fuels. I mean, we talk about well blowouts, we talk about it's carbon intensive, we talk about the fact that it's water intensive, but the bigger issue is that if we are serious about protecting this blue marble that we're on, we need to move away from fossil fuels and actually embrace renewable energy. In this area, there's a lot of wind. Why don't we use it?
Thank you.
It's Owen's turn. Owen Smith, your turn. I'll come to you, sir. Owen Smith.
Well, look, the truth is, Nigel is completely wrong. The benefits of fracking are totally overblown. The volume of jobs will be tiny. The reserves that we have are much lesser than America or France or some of the other places where they have shale gas to frack. And in some of those places, like France, they've decided not to go after it. Why did we have the Tories overruling local people? Because they decided around the time of them getting elected in 2010 that it was a good idea for them to try and mimic the states, that they could sell to people as part of their election platform that they were going to unveil this great new industrial revolution. It was going to produce jobs and cheap, free energy practically in this country. All a load of rubbish. The other thing they've lied to people about is their suggestion that local people and local decisions will be given primacy. That clearly hasn't happened here. It should have happened. And if it had happened, we wouldn't have the fracking in Blackpool. It wouldn't happen under a Labour government.
OK. That person there, with the blue shirt, yeah.
See, what we've actually said before about how this is, the greenhouse gas is produced by this. It doesn't matter what jobs you've got, what money you have, when we're all dead from global warming. That is definitely the main point here. And when you've got the German people have had to shut down nuclear power plants because they didn't like them, despite the fact that, greenhouse gas-wise, it's, you know,
They
completely
brought coal
clean.
everywhere. New coal-fired power stations all over Germany.
And a quarter of the energy we're using in Britain today has come from wind. So why haven't the Tories invested in wind power?
And you, sir?
I think tonight more than ever, you know, emphasised the fact of a reliance on gas. Everyone in this room is going to go home tonight and put the gas central heating on. Well, a wind turbine is not going to heat your house.
Quarter of
and
all
it was
the
a
energy
Labour
being
Party.
used in Britain today.
Listen, there was a Labour Party in 2008 that actually got the ball rolling on shale gas and issued the exploratory drilling licences.
And do you think, is it going to happen here? They say it's going to happen in the spring.
And
it will happen.
Put billions of pounds into the revenue of the government. We are using tonight Russian and Qatari gas to heat our homes.
So you want to see it happen?
Yes, absolutely.
And will it be good for the local economy?
It will be good for the local economy. It will pump millions and millions of pounds in the local economy. This is not a mirror effect of the production of the shale gas in America.
Right.
This is under British regulations and British gas engineers. The best in the world. We will do it right.
OK, a brief point from you.
I wonder whether the decision would have been overturned in the same way if the fracking was taking place south of Watford.
OK.
Surrey Hill.
Well, that's a good wonder. But we'll go on. I don't know how much more time we've got, but we take another question from Helen Wright, very pertinent to everybody watching tonight. Helen.
Is the beast from the east more like hysteria from Siberia? And should bosses expect their staff to turn up at work?
OK. Owen Smith, what's Labour's view on people turning up to work? You know, there are issues here about whether you get paid, whether you get holiday leave. What happens if you can't get to work? And are we making a lot of fuss about this snow?
I'm all in favour of people turning up to work, and we do in this country make an enormous fuss about the snow, but we have heard this evening that there have been a number of people who've died as a result of the weather today. So I don't think it's been completely overblown this time. And some of the scenes in South Wales, where I'm from, look pretty treacherous this evening, and clearly some of the public services that have been closed today, schools, etc., I think that's normally sensible. But, you know, generally, I think we do tend to make a bit too much of a bit of snow, and quite often people probably could just about get into work
Michelle?
if they tried a bit harder.
Well, I'm a big believer in common sense, and I think that employers
How do you know what
to...
common sense is? I've never understood the expression.
Well, I mean, it's
what
just...
everybody else thinks, or what you think, or when everybody else agrees with you,
well,
or what? What
I
is
speak common sense, so if you listen to me, just anything I say, that's the definition.
That's what I thought you meant.
Exactly. But no, as an employer, you literally do need to implement common sense. It makes no sense if a job can be done remotely, if a job is not essential to be done that day, then you should be applying common sense to your employees. I think sometimes we do go over the top too quickly. So when we first got notification of the beast from the east, you know, we were already talking about train cancellations and things like that. And at that point in time, it was just a smatter. It was like the tiniest. I was outside doing personal training and they were cancelling trains. Yeah. It was not even that bad at the beginning. So I think sometimes we don't need to be so quick to cancel everything and worry. Just apply your common sense is my advice.
A slightly serious point. I mean, I'm just here representing myself, but obviously I work for a living. But when I was a child, my mum fundamentally brought me and my sister up. And then one of the biggest issues is when school gets cancelled, someone's got to look after me. And actually one big consideration for me is that whilst we could apply common sense, I think also we need to consider parents and who's going to look after their children if they're going to be home alone.
OK. And the woman there. Yes.
People are saying that it's not a huge issue and it's a little thing, but it is a huge issue for the lowest earners in society who struggle to heat their homes. It's a huge issue for the homeless and for the elderly. It's an insult to them to say stop.
OK. Nigel Farage.
Well, if we had cheap gas as opposed to expensive wind energy, you know, they might better heat their homes. Look, I mean, they were cancelling trains before the snow had started to fall. They were closing schools all over southern England when there was no snow on the ground at all, but the threat it might come, and used by people as an excuse not to go to work. Frankly, look, you know, this storm Emma tonight could dump 18 inches of snow over parts of South Wales and the South West, and common sense dictates the roads will be closed. But frankly, I think we should all do our best when it snows or it's windy, rather than listen to this hysterical nonsense. We get, I mean, red warnings and amber warnings. It's all over the top. We should be a bit more stoic, a bit more British, and jolly well get on with life, in my view.
Ken Clark.
Well, we used to have a lot more snow in winter, I think. It's not only my recollection, I think I accurately recall. So events like today were not quite so rare a few years ago, and I do think we're getting a little overexcited. Because I was on this programme, I was watching television news, various channels, trying to see what had happened today, and I gave up on the BBC News channel when their first quarter of an hour of the programme was devoted to snow in various parts of the country. And I think there are many people who feel themselves under a moral obligation, they are, to get to work in the snow, all the emergency services, people working in the healthcare field and so on. I think the ordinary person should feel an obligation to get to work if it's reasonably sensible to expect them to do so. They shouldn't risk their lives or anything of that kind. But we've all got here this evening, and we don't deserve medals for it. It was snowing where I started my journey, and it wasn't the pleasantest day to travel.
You may not get home.
What we should not start doing is closing down public services because the weather forecast is bad. Okay. We should at least wait for the snow to arrive before people start taking time off work.
I'll take a couple of points, and then we go on to another question. You, at the back there.
I think the lady who called it the hysteria in Siberia was absolutely right. I mean, I take the point that in South Wales, in Scotland, yes, snow is very, very bad indeed. But here in the northwest, not at all. And there were people in the local supermarket that were buying up toilet paper on Monday. And not one flake of snow dropped.
We've all become snowflakes. That's the problem, isn't it?
OK.
Brexit's changed the political atmosphere. It's terrible now.
I love that toilet paper, not baked beans. Let's come back to this part of the world, though, and to the problems of Blackpool and the area around. A question from Deborah Terrace. Let's have that, please.
How do we encourage more investment in Blackpool to ensure we keep young people's talent and skills in their hometown? And
it should be said, Blackpool does have problems. It has problems with mental health. It has problems with the NHS. It has an economy that's fallen. It's the fourth most deprived local authority. On almost every count, it's a part of the country that's poorer than the parts around it. Who'd like to start on this? Ken Clark, you were a Northern Powerhouse man, or you were part of that government?
Well, I've also had various over the years with a lot of regional policy and so on.
Well, how do you encourage investment in a place like this? That's
well, I think nationally, particularly a place like this, there are key things we've neglected for too long. Skills training, education standards, really achieving good standards of education, more important in areas which are having economic difficulty than in the more prosperous areas elsewhere. And how actually can the government relate to key sectors of industry in a way that properly and sensibly promotes their rapid growth. And we haven't really solved it. I mean, the reason for the present anger in politics is we had, but until the financial crash came, which was the greed of bankers and the uselessness of regulators, but before that we had a good long time when we thought we were getting richer and better and living standards were rising. Whole lots of people were left behind and the economy was changing. So in some places the old industries, steel and so on were going. In Blackpool, the old basis for the economy was going, we've got to find a new one. And industrial strategies and all that thing, Greg, we could be producing lots and lots on it now. I don't think yet we know, to be honest, exactly how to go to a town whose old economic base has weakened and quickly begin to inject what's needed. But modern employment is needed in Blackpool, and the biggest task facing governments the next decade or two will how to make sure we can do that more quickly than we have in recent years.
You, sir?
About 25 years ago, in Blackpool, we had two world-renowned manufacturing companies, TVR Cars, based at Bispham, just north of Blackpool, and also Duple Coaches, based at Marton, in Blackpool. And they were two of the largest employers in this town.
And they've gone?
And they've gone.
What's your view about what should happen?
What should happen, I think that the seaside, is it called the government seaside...
The coastal policy,
The coastal policy.
Yes.
We've not heard very much apart from sea defences.
OK, you, sir, quickly, because we have only got a few minutes.
Yeah, we may have some of the problems that Ken Clark outlined in Blackpool, but we've actually got a wonderful town and a place that gives millions and millions of people hours of fun. And millions of people will still come back to Blackpool in their droves.
Nigel Farage.
Two things. One, let's get back our territorial waters and let's get back the fish that swim in our seas, and that will benefit the North West considerably. And secondly, you know, you should never just tell an audience what you think they want to hear. Tell them what you really think. You're looking a gift horse in the mouth with the shale gas industry. It will revolutionise the economy of this area. I'm sorry you don't like it.
Radzicinian-Ganya.
So I come from Wolverhampton. I think very similar problems in Wolverhampton as which happen in Blackpool. One of the big ones is education. And I think if you don't educate people, people don't feel like they have an opportunity to succeed. I happen to have what I think is the best mother on the planet. She's instilled within me a belief that I can do anything that I put my mind to, and whatever we can do to give young people that belief in themselves, I think that's what will make Blackpool prosper.
The woman here, briefly if you would. Yes, yes?
Hi. Major problem in Blackpool is education. 10% in the country, our education, our schools are failing. So how can we, when we're all being academised, work towards giving our children a greater education?
OK, and we are, of course, in an academy here, as it happens, in Blackpool.
Yes,
Michelle, what do you think?
Well, I'd say 2 points. So first of all, I think Brexit presents a great opportunity. We're taking a lot of power back from Brussels, hopefully. And I would like to see, instead of all of that power going into London, I would like to see proper devolution so that actual northern places can create prosperity amongst themselves. I'm from Hull. I've had many a good girls' weekend out in Blackpool. It was wonderful. I've got wonderful memories. And Blackpool should be in a position to prosper. And when we talk about education, I feel very strongly about this. I work with a group of technical schools called UTCs, and we join up employers with schools, and we have employer-led curriculums. And what we try to do is create a workforce that's ready and ripe for the local economy. And also, you should be working with young people as well to stimulate entrepreneurialism, giving them that belief that they can create their own opportunities as well, wherever they live.
Owen Smith, I have to ask you to be brief, I'm afraid.
Government's got to recognise that it's got a responsibility to fix these problems. Instead of cutting back public services and cutting back investment, we've got to end austerity, which has completely failed, and invest once more in our communities.
How would it help Blackpool?
Well, because we should have a regional investment structure, a banking structure that puts money, government money, into areas like Blackpool, into areas like South Wales, the ex-industrial areas of this country, recognise the skills that are here in manufacturing, capitalise on that with a real active industrial strategy that pushes jobs and incentivises the public sector and private sector to invest, and invest in skills. Young people don't cut back spending on schools or cut back spending on university education or cut back on support for schools generally. Invest in our young people. That's the secret. And we've seen the reverse of that from the Tories under the last 7 years. We've got to get back to investing in the people in all of our communities.
Our hour's up, I'm afraid. Apologies to those of you who have your hands up, but our time's up. We have to stop. We're going to be in Westminster next Thursday with Question Time. We have the International Trade Secretary Liam Fox on the panel, George the poet, and the Bake-Off judge Prue Leith on that panel. And the week after, we're going to be in the port of Dover, and that's a suitable place to be. It marks 1 year to go till the UK leaves the EU. I don't know whether we're talking about the EU again, but maybe we will. Call 0330123 9988 if you would like to come to either of those two programmes. On the screen is the address, the website, if you want to go to that instead. If you want to talk about the things we've been talking about tonight, there's this excellent continuation on Question Time, Extra Time with Adrian Chiles on 5 Live now on the radio. And you can also watch it by pushing the red button. You can watch it on the BBC iPlayer. So I hope you'll be able to do that. My thanks to this panel and to all of you who, I was going to say made it through the snow, but there hasn't been any snow in Blackpool, but of all of you who came here tonight to take part in this edition of Question Time. Until next Thursday, good night.